r/MaliciousCompliance. Mom hit $20,000 watch collection, so I exposed it all. Hashtag chunk 1. The basement smelled like mold and old cardboard, just like I remembered. I was down there looking for my winter coat, the one with the broken zipper that I'd been wearing for 2 years because Mom said a new one wasn't in the budget, when I knocked over the plastic storage bin. It wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't snooping. I swear to God, I wasn't snooping. But there it was, spilled across the concrete floor, a watch. Not just any watch. A Rolex. Gleaming, pristine, definitely real. The kind of watch you see in movies, worn by people who have their lives together. I stared at it for a solid 10 seconds before picking it up with shaking hands. The bin had toppled off a shelf that was tucked behind the old water heater, hidden behind a stack of boxes that said, "Smaz Decorations," on the side. I stood there, holding this impossible weight in my palm, and something in my chest started to crack. I moved the decoration boxes. Just slowly, carefully, to the side. There were 7 more bins. All identical. All labeled with dates going back 5 years. My legs felt weird as I opened the nearest one. It was like watching a movie where the sound cuts out, everything was moving in this strange, disconnected way. Inside were watches. Beautiful, expensive-looking watches. I recognized maybe half of them because my mom used to work in a jewelry store before she became a receptionist at a dental office. Cartier. Omega. Breitling. Tag Heuer. Another Rolex, and then another. I sat down on the concrete floor in my stupid broken zipper coat and just sat there. My name is Jordan. I'm 17. And for the past 3 years, I have worn the same 5 shirts to school because we can't afford new clothes right now. Last year, I needed glasses. Really needed them. I was sitting in class squinting at the board, and I asked Mom if I could get an eye exam. She said we had to wait until next year, maybe, when money was less tight. I got a job at the local grocery store, saved up $200, and bought the cheapest frames they had. 2 months ago, I had a toothache. A bad one. It lasted for 4 days before I told Mom because I knew what she would say. She did say it, "We don't have money for the dentist right now. Rinse with salt water." It turned out I had an infection that required a root canal. The infection spread. I ended up in the emergency room at 3 in the morning, and that visit cost us more than any dentist appointment ever would have. Mom was furious about the ER bill. The grocery store where I work pays minimum wage. I help with the bills. I buy my own school supplies. I haven't asked for anything extra, like something as ridiculous as new shoes or a haircut, in probably 2 years. I dye my own hair to save money. I cut my own bangs, which explains why they look slightly uneven, which is fine, everything is fine. My best friend Madison has a mom who takes her to brunch sometimes. Not even fancy brunch, like Panera Brunch. And I remember Madison mentioning once that her mom bought herself a nice watch for her 40th birthday. It cost $300. She wore it like it was made of diamonds. She'd hold her wrist up and admire it. I opened another bin. These watches weren't $300. I recognized a few because I'd made the mistake of Googling watch prices once, some random Tuesday when I was procrastinating on homework. The Rolex Submariner alone cost somewhere around $7,000. The Omega Seamaster is about $6,000. That's just the ones I could identify. And there were at least 30 watches across these 8 bins. I felt dizzy. My phone was in my pocket. I took a picture. Then I took 17 more, trying to get different angles, different lighting. My hands were shaking so badly that some of the photos came out blurry. I put everything back. As carefully as I could, I returned each watch to its bin, returned the bins to the shelf, repositioned the decoration boxes. I found my stupid coat with the broken zipper hanging on a hook by the stairs, and I went back upstairs to our kitchen where Mom was making dinner. She was making pasta with Jared sauce. The same dinner she'd made last night and the night before. The cheap kind of sauce, the store brand. Because we couldn't afford the good kind. "Find your coat," she asked, not looking up from the stove. My throat felt tight. I was 17 years old, almost 18, and I had never fought with my mother about anything serious. Not really. We existed in this careful balance where I didn't ask for things, and she didn't have to say no. But something inside me had shifted in that basement, in the space between opening the first bin and closing the last one. "Mom," I said. "What's in the bins behind the water heater?" She went completely still. Her hand froze on the wooden spoon. The pasta water continued to boil, steam rising between us like a living thing. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally. Very quietly. "The watches," I said. "There are like 30 watches down there. Expensive ones. Really expensive ones." She turned around then, and her face was something I'd never seen before. Not angry, exactly. Worse than angry. Closed. Like a door slamming shut. "That's not your business," she said, her voice cold and flat. "And you need to stop snooping around where you don't belong." "It's not my business." I heard my voice getting higher. "Mom, you told me yesterday that we can't afford a new backpack. My backpack literally has a hole in it. I have to use a plastic bag as a lining so my books don't fall through. You're telling me it's not my business when You are 17 years old," she said, cutting me off. Her voice had turned sharp, dangerous. "And if you ever mention what you think you saw down there again, to me, to anyone, you can find somewhere else to live. Do you understand me? This is not a discussion. You mind your own business, or you're out. Those are your options." She turned back to the pasta like the conversation was over. I stood there in my broken zipper coat, holding my phone with 17 blurry pictures of luxury watches, and I understood something crucial. This was going to get much worse before it got better. Hashtag chunk 2. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, which had a water stain shaped like a disappointed face, and scrolled through those 17 blurry photos over and over again. Each time I looked at them, they felt more real. More impossible. More infuriating. By 3 a.m., I'd done something stupid. I'd looked up the prices of every watch I could identify. I'd created a spreadsheet. A fucking spreadsheet, like I was doing homework, like this was a normal, rational response to discovering your mother had been lying to you for years. The total came to $23,847. $23,847. I stared at that number until the digits stopped making sense. That was the amount she'd spent on watches while I wore the same 5 shirts. While I squinted at chalkboards. While my tooth got infected because we couldn't afford preventative care. While I went to school with a backpack held together with duct tape and hope. My phone buzzed. Madison, texting in our group chat at some ungodly hour, probably drunk or procrastinating on an essay like a normal teenager. I didn't respond. How could I? How could I participate in normal life when my mother had been living a secret life of luxury in our basement? I got up and went to the kitchen at 4 a.m. The house was silent. Mom's door was closed. I made myself a cup of tea I didn't want and sat at our kitchen table, the same table with the wobbly leg that Dad had said he'd fix before he left when I was 6. I'd grown up thinking we were poor. Not desperately poor, but the kind of perpetually broke that felt permanent. Inevitable. Like this was just how our lives were supposed to be. Except it wasn't. When I finally went to school at 7 a.m., I felt hollowed out. My best friend Chloe noticed immediately. She was waiting by my locker like she always did, holding 2 coffees from the cafe next to the school. You look like actual death, she said, handing me one. Did you stay up all night gaming or having an existential crisis? Existential crisis, I said, and it wasn't technically a lie. About what? College. Because honestly, same, but I'm trying not to think about it until senior year actually happens. I took a sip of the coffee. It was too hot. Family stuff. Chloe made a sympathetic face. She knew my family situation wasn't great. Everyone kind of did. Poor single mom, sad teenage kid, it was the kind of narrative people felt comfortable with, the kind that made them feel better about their own lives. Want to talk about it? Not yet, I said. The day dragged on in this strange, surreal way. In English class, Mr. Patterson assigned us to read The Great Gatsby, and I found myself thinking about how everyone in that book was lying about something. How all that wealth was built on secrets and delusions. Somehow, that felt relevant. By lunch, I was vibrating with barely contained rage. I sat with Chloe and our friend group, and they talked about normal things, who was going to the football game, whether Jessica and Tyler were actually back together, and I felt like I was watching them from behind glass. Earth to Jordan, Chloe said, waving a hand in front of my face. You're being weird. Weirder than usual. I'm fine, I said. But I wasn't fine. I was thinking about that spreadsheet. I was thinking about the root canal that cost us $1,200. I was thinking about my mother's face when I asked about the bins, that cold, flat voice telling me to mind my own business or get out. I was thinking about what would happen if other people knew. That thought arrived like a door opening, and I immediately tried to close it. But it was too late. The thought had lodged itself in my brain, and it wasn't leaving. When I got home after school, after my shift at the grocery store, where I pretended to care about scanning items while my mind was somewhere else entirely, Mom was in the kitchen again. She was always in the kitchen. It was like that was the only room in the house where she was allowed to exist in our narrative. The struggling single mother, cooking simple meals, doing her best. Except she wasn't doing her best. She was doing theater. Hi, I said, setting my backpack down carefully. The one with the hole in it. Hi, she said back, and her voice was normal, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't threatened to kick me out. Like there weren't 8 bins of luxury watches hidden in the basement. How was work, she asked. Fine, I said. She was chopping vegetables. Carrots, I think. The cheapest ones, from the budget bin. I watched her hands move across the cutting board and felt something cold settle in my chest. A clarity I didn't want. Mom, I said slowly, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. She didn't look up from the carrots. Why? Like, why would you keep those watches if we can't afford basic things? Her hands stopped moving. She set the knife down very carefully on the cutting board. I thought I made it clear that we're not discussing that, she said quietly. But I don't understand. That's $24,000, Mom. Do you understand what that means? That could have paid for. It could have paid for a lot of things, she interrupted. Her voice was strange now, tight. It could have paid for your college. It could have paid for your father's legal bills. It could have paid for a lot of things, and you know what? None of it is any of your business. Those watches are mine. I earned the money for them. I spent my own money on something I wanted, and I don't owe you an explanation for that. You earned it. I heard my voice get louder. I couldn't stop it. You work at a dental office. You make like $32,000 a year. You're telling me you spent almost $24,000 on watches. That's like 70% of your annual salary. 45%, actually, she said coldly. Over 5 years. And yes, I'm telling you exactly that. I work hard. I deserve to have something nice. Something that's just for me, that I don't have to sacrifice or explain. Is that really so terrible? Yes. I said. Yes, it is, because while you were buying Rolexes, I was. Then you know what? You can leave. Go stay with a friend. I'm done having this conversation. She picked the knife back up and started cutting again, harder than before, the blade hitting the wooden board with aggressive precision. I stood there in my kitchen, in my destroyed backpack, in my broken zipper coat, and I made a decision. It wasn't a good decision. I knew that even as I was making it. But it was the only decision that felt like it might make any of this fair. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. #chunk3. My thumb hovered over the Instagram app. The little camera icon seemed to pulse with possibility, or maybe that was just my heartbeat doing weird things in my chest. My hands were shaking. Actually shaking. Like I was cold, except I was burning up from the inside out. I could hear Mom still cutting vegetables behind me. Chop. 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 The sound of someone who thought this conversation was over. The sound of someone who just told her 17-year-old kid to get out, who prioritized luxury watches over her child's dental health, over basic school supplies, over anything resembling honesty. I opened Instagram. My feed loaded, photos of Chloe at some party last weekend, a video of Tyler doing something stupid with a shopping cart, Madison's aesthetic sunset pictures. Normal stuff. The stuff I was supposed to be thinking about. The stuff that didn't matter. I went to my messages instead. Not my public messages, but my DMs. I had about 47 followers, most of them people from school. Not exactly an influencer situation, but the point wasn't really the followers, was it? The point was that once something was on the internet, it had a way of spreading. I'd seen it happen 100 times. Someone posts something stupid, and by the next day, everyone knows about it. My finger hovered over the camera icon. One photo. Just one of those 17 blurry pictures from my phone, cropped to show just the watches and the bins, no identifying information. Just the pure, undeniable evidence of the lie. I'm going upstairs, Mom said behind me, washing her hands at the sink. I have a headache. Don't make a mess in the kitchen. Don't make a mess. Okay. That was funny, actually. That was objectively hilarious because her entire existence was a mess. Her entire parenting strategy was a mess. Her entire relationship with me was built on a foundation of beautiful, expensive lies. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close upstairs before I did anything. Here's the thing about decisions made at 5:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when you're 17 and angry and hollowed out, they have a way of feeling perfectly rational right up until they're permanent. I took a screenshot of one of the photos. Cropped it carefully. Checked to make sure you couldn't see anything that would identify my basement specifically. The bins were generic. The watches were just watches. Expensive watches, but generic in that way that all luxury items are generic, the same brands you see in fancy stores, the ones you know cost more than a used car. I opened a new note on my phone. Typed out, found out my mom spent $24,000 on a luxury watch collection while telling me we couldn't afford basic necessities. Been denying me money for school supplies, medical care, clothes. When confronted, told me to mind my own business and threatened to kick me out. The poverty was a choice. I read it 3 times. It was all true. Every single word was factually accurate. That felt important. I wasn't lying. I was just distributing information. Making things everyone's business, like Mom had so kindly instructed me to do. My cursor hovered over post. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Chloe, still weird about today. Call me if you need to vent. I'm home RN. I stared at that text for a long moment. Chloe had spent the last 3 years watching me navigate life on a budget that didn't make sense. She offered to buy me lunch more times than I could count. She'd been to my house, seen the state of things, watched me make excuses about why I couldn't afford to do normal teenage things. She believed the narrative because I'd sold it so convincingly. Poor family, bad luck, that's just how things were. What would she think if she knew the truth? What would everyone think? I closed out of Instagram without posting. Instead, I called Chloe. She answered on the second ring, her voice all concerned best friend energy. Hey, what's up? You okay? Can I come over? I asked. Yeah, of course. My parents are at some dinner thing, so it's just me. Come over whenever. I grabbed my backpack, the stupid broken one, and went upstairs. Mom's door was closed. I could hear the faint sound of a true crime podcast playing from inside. She was lying in bed with her headache, probably not thinking about this conversation at all, probably already filing it away as the unreasonable complaints of an ungrateful teenager. 20 minutes later, I was sitting on Chloe's bed in her pristine suburban bedroom, staring at her perfectly organized bookshelf and her working desk lamp and her parents' money manifested in 1,000 small comforts, and I felt something break open inside my chest. Okay, you're scaring me, Chloe said, sitting down next to me. What's going on? Is your mom okay? Are you okay? Did you know my family has money? I asked. What? No. I mean, you're always, budget conscious, and your mom is, she trailed off. Wait, what do you mean? I pulled out my phone. Showed her the photos. Watched her face go through about 6 different emotions in a span of 30 seconds. Oh my God, she said softly. Jordan. Oh my God. I know. How much are those? Almost $24,000. Over 5 years. My mom has been buying luxury watches while I've been. I mean, I didn't even get to see a dentist for a year because we couldn't afford it. I have a root canal. Do you know how much that costs? That's insane, Chloe said, and she sounded genuinely angry, which somehow made it worse because her anger was validation. That's actually insane. Why would she? She said she deserves something nice. Something that's just for her. Chloe was quiet for a moment. Then, are you going to tell someone? That was the question, wasn't it? The one that had been building pressure in my skull since 3 a.m. The one that had brought me to the edge of posting on Instagram before backing away like I'd touched something hot. I don't know, I said. But that was a lie. I did know. I'd known since the moment I found those bins. I was just waiting for the right moment. The right reason. The permission I didn't actually need to give myself. If you did, Chloe said carefully, I mean. People would find out, right? About all of this. Yeah, I said. They would. Hashtag chunk 4. The next morning, I woke up on Chloe's couch with that specific kind of dread that comes from knowing you made a choice you can't unmake. Except I hadn't made it yet. That was the thing. I was still in the window where I could decide not to do this, where I could go home and pretend I'd never found those bins, where I could continue the performance of being the grateful poor kid. Chloe's mom made pancakes. She was nice about it, actually nice, the kind of nice that comes from genuine kindness, not the brittle kind mom performed when she wanted something. She asked me how school was going, if I was managing okay, if there was anything I needed. The irony was so thick I could barely choke down the pancakes. I'm fine, I said, which was technically true. I was fine. I was also furious and betrayed in something else I didn't have a name for yet. When I got home around noon, Mom was in the kitchen again. Different vegetables this time. She looked at me like I was something she'd stepped in. You spent the night at Chloe's, she said. Not a question. Yeah. I texted you. You could have asked permission. I laughed. Actually laughed. You told me to leave. I told you to cool off, she said, and I watched her rewrite the entire conversation in real time, watched her decide that what happened had been something different than what actually happened. There's a difference, Jordan. You're being dramatic about this. That's when I realized something. She wasn't going to change. She wasn't going to suddenly feel bad or guilty or explain herself in a way that made sense. She was just going to keep doing this, keep buying the watches, keep denying me things, keep acting like I was the unreasonable one for noticing the contradiction. I'm going to be in my room, I said. Fine. We can talk about your attitude later. My attitude. As if that was the problem. My phone had 3 messages I hadn't seen until now. First, one from Chloe at 8 a.m, you good? Thinking about what you said last night. Then one from my Aunt Sarah, Mom's sister, asking if I could help her move some boxes this weekend. And then, most surprisingly, one from my dad, hey kiddo. Your mom mentioned you might be staying with me next weekend. That still work for you? I stared at that last one. My parents had divorced when I was 14. Dad lived 40 minutes away, had remarried, had a stepdad and a new set of rules that I'd never quite figured out. He was a good guy. He paid child support. He'd offered to help with bigger things before, but Mom had always said it wasn't necessary, we were managing fine. That we were fine. I called him back instead of texting. Hey, buddy, he answered on the first ring. Your mom said you wanted to switch weekends. I didn't ask her for that, I said. There was a pause. Oh. Okay. Did you want to come this weekend or not? This was the moment. I could feel it, the exact point where the story could go a different direction. I could tell him about the watches right now. He was a lawyer. He'd understand the financial implications. He might even understand the custody implications. Child support was supposed to be about the child's needs, and if Mom had $24,000 in disposable income. Yeah, I said instead. I can come. Great. Saturday or Sunday arrival? Saturday. I'll let your mom know. After we hung up, I sat on my bed for a long time, just thinking about what I was doing. What I was planning. I pulled up Instagram again and scrolled through the photos I'd taken. There were 17 of them total. 17 angles of the evidence of my mother's hypocrisy. I could post one. Just one. Frame it vaguely. Found something interesting in my house. Can't believe the lies, with some angry face emojis. Let people speculate. Let the story spread organically. Or I could send it directly to Dad. Or I could tell Aunt Sarah, who actually had a functioning adult relationship with Mom and might be able to talk to her about this like a person. Or I could keep it to myself and just file it away. Use it later if I needed leverage for something, college money, a car, freedom. Or I could do what I'd been planning to do all along. The thing was, each of these options had consequences that spiraled out in different directions. Posting publicly meant I couldn't control the narrative. It would be humiliating for Mom, yes, but it would also be humiliating for me. Everyone at school would know. Everyone would be talking about it. People would take sides, and I'd be on the side of the kid who publicly shamed her mother. Telling Dad meant creating a potential custody battle. It meant having to prove everything, having to justify why I was being this way, having to convince him that Mom was actually bad and not just eccentric. Telling Aunt Sarah meant putting her in a position where she had to choose between loyalty to her sister and what was obviously wrong. And keeping it to myself meant continuing to live in this house, with this person, watching her buy more watches while I wore a coat with a broken zipper. I pulled up Chloe's contact and called her. Hey, she answered. Feeling any better? I'm coming to tell you something, I said, and I need you to help me figure out if I'm crazy. Okay, do you want to come over? Tonight. After dinner. Tell your parents I'm helping you with homework. Jordan, you're freaking me out a little. I know. I'm freaking myself out too. But I need to talk to someone who actually cares, and I need to figure out what the right thing to do is. The right thing to do about what? I took a breath. About exposing my mom. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, oh. Yeah. Okay, Chloe said, and I could hear the firmness settling into her voice. Okay. Come over. We'll figure this out together. I hung up the phone and looked at my reflection in the dark mirror of my phone screen. 17 years old, wearing a hoodie I'd had since 9th grade, with my mother's lies compiling interest in my chest like a debt I didn't know how to pay. The watch collection was still in the basement. And I still had to decide whether to destroy everything. #chunk 5. The drive to Chloe's house felt longer than usual, like the roads had stretched themselves out to give me more time to change my mind. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other gripped around my phone in my jacket pocket, where the photos lived like a secret I was carrying into a confession booth. When I got there, Chloe was waiting on the porch. It was weird seeing her like that, standing outside in the cooling evening air, arms wrapped around herself, looking at me like I was someone she didn't quite recognize. I guess in a way, I wasn't the person she'd known this morning. Okay, she said as soon as I climbed the steps. Inside. My parents are doing dinner at the Hendersons next door. We have maybe 2 hours. We went up to her room and she shut the door with more ceremony than seemed necessary. Chloe had one of those rooms that looked like it belonged in a magazine, organized, clean, everything in its place. Mine looked like a tornado had opinions about interior design. The contrast felt significant somehow. Show me, she said, sitting on her bed. I pulled out my phone and handed it to her, watching her face as she scrolled through the photos. Her eyes got wider with each image, the bins, the boxes, the Rolexes and Omegas and brands I'd had to Google to understand the full extent of what I was looking at. She spent a long time on one particular photo, a close-up of a watch with a face that looked like it was made of actual gold. How much? She finally asked. 24,000. Maybe more. I didn't count the most recent stuff. Oh my god. She looked up at me. Jordan, that's like a car. That's a full scholarship. That's. I know what it is, I said, maybe more sharply than I meant to. Chloe flinched a little, but she didn't put the phone down. Okay, so what are you actually thinking here? Like, are you just venting, or are you actually considering? I'm considering it, I said. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. She set the phone down carefully on her bedspread, like it might explode. Jordan. If you do this, you can't undo it. You know that, right? I know. Like, really know it. Not just intellectually. Actually know it in a part of your brain that understands consequences. I sat down on her desk chair and spun it slowly, not looking at her. Last night she literally told me we couldn't afford basic things. 2 days ago she said no to a field trip that cost $60. I've been wearing the same winter coat for 3 years. And the whole time she was buying luxury watches, Chloe finished. Yeah. Okay. Chloe was quiet for a moment, working through something. So here's what I'm trying to figure out. Are you mad at her for lying about money, or are you mad at her for not giving you money? The question hit me like a brick. What? I said. I'm not trying to be a bitch, Chloe said carefully. I'm genuinely asking. Because those are two different things. And one of them is a reason to have a conversation, and the other one is a reason to blow your family apart. She's been lying to me. She's been lying to everyone. Yeah, okay, but like, Chloe pulled her legs up onto the bed, getting into full serious conversation posture. Your parents are divorced. Your dad pays child support. Is your mom spending that on watches instead of you? Probably. Probably. You don't know. I found them, I said. I didn't exactly do a forensic accounting of her bank statements. Right, but you're planning to publicly expose her, which seems like the kind of thing that should involve actual proof, doesn't it? I hated that Chloe was being logical about this. I'd come here for validation, for someone to tell me that posting those photos was the right and noble thing to do. Instead she was asking questions that were like little cracks in the wall I'd been building around my justifications. My point is, she continued, if you're going to do this, you need to know exactly what you're accusing her of. Because if you post those pictures without context, it just looks like your mom collects watches. And if she's not doing anything illegal, then you're just a kid who publicly shamed her mother for having a hobby she apparently paid for somehow. A hobby? Chloe, she told me we couldn't afford. I heard you. But did she literally say, I can't afford to give you money because I'm buying watches instead? Or did she just say the generic we don't have money thing that parents say? I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it. Because the truth was, she hadn't explicitly connected the two things. She just said they couldn't afford things. She just denied me. And I'd found the watches and made the connection myself. See? Chloe said, and she didn't sound smug about it, which somehow made it worse. You're angry, and rightfully so. But anger isn't the same as having a case. So what are you saying? I should just do nothing. I'm saying maybe you should talk to your dad first. Or like, actually look at the financial situation before you decide to burn the whole house down. Chloe reached over and squeezed my knee. I'm saying that if you're going to do something this nuclear, maybe do it smart. Maybe make sure you actually know what you're accusing her of. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Mom, what time will you be home? She's checking on me, I said, showing Chloe. Wow. That's controlling. I know. But actually, it wasn't. It was just a normal parent checking on their kid. Which was another thing that was making all of this complicated in ways I hadn't fully considered. Okay, Chloe said. New plan. You go home. You be normal. This weekend you go to your dad's. You actually talk to him about the financial stuff. You find out if she's doing anything illegal with the child support. And then, after you've actually thought about this with people who love you, you decide what to do. And if I go to my dad and he tells me I should forget about it, then you know your answer, Chloe said. And if he tells you it's serious, then you do whatever you need to do. But at least you'll be doing it from a place of actual knowledge instead of just anger. I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to tell her that sometimes anger was enough, that sometimes you didn't need a perfect case to call out bullshit when you saw it. But I also knew she was right, and I hated her a little bit for being right. This is not what I wanted you to say, I told her. I know, Chloe said. But it's what you needed to hear. My phone buzzed again. Mom, Jordan. I texted back, at Chloe's. Be home by 9. And then I sat in my best friend's perfectly organized room, feeling like my entire plan had just developed a crack, and wondering if cracks were the kind of thing that could spread until everything fell apart. Chunk 6. The walk home felt longer than usual, even though it was the same route I'd taken 1,000 times. The photos were still in my phone. The watches were still in the basement. Chloe's words were still rattling around in my head like loose change in a dryer. You need to actually know what you're accusing her of. When I got home, Mom was in the kitchen pretending to be interested in something on her laptop. She looked up when I came in, and there was this moment where I studied her face like I was trying to see if guilt lived there. It didn't. She just looked tired, which somehow made it worse. How was Chloe's? She asked. Fine, I said. We just did homework stuff. On a Friday night. We have a test. I was lying so easily now. The practice made it smoother each time, which was its own kind of depressing. Mom closed her laptop. There's pasta in the fridge if you're hungry. I wasn't sure what time you'd be back. Thanks. I went upstairs without eating, locked myself in my room, and pulled up my text messages with Dad. He usually responded pretty quickly, but his last message was from 2 days ago, something about confirming plans for next weekend. I opened a new message and typed, *, can I come over this Saturday? Have some stuff I want to talk about, *. He responded within 5 minutes, *, of course. Everything okay, *. I stared at that question. Everything wasn't okay. But it also wasn't something I could explain in a text message. *, just stuff with Mom. Nothing terrible. Just need to ask you some things, *. Okay. 11 a.m. Saturday, *. Yeah. Thanks, *. I set the phone down and sat on my bed, staring at the crack in my ceiling that had been there since middle school. Chloe had basically told me to go get my dad's permission before I did anything, which felt like a betrayal of the whole plan. Except it wasn't a betrayal, was it? It was just sense. It was the kind of thing the old version of me would have done immediately. The version of me that existed before I found the watches. Before I got angry in a way that felt like it had always been building. My phone buzzed again. A notification from Instagram. Someone had tagged me in a comment on a post about the school fundraiser. I almost didn't look at it, but I did, and that's when I saw the problem. Emily Harrington had posted a photo of the fundraiser flyer with the caption, * who's donating? My family's giving $500. Support our school. * and in the comments, someone had written, * not everyone can afford to donate, Emily. Some people are actually struggling, *. And then someone else had written, * yeah, like Jordan's family lol. No judgment, but they literally sell stuff at the garage sale every year, *. I felt my face get hot reading that. Because it was true, we did sell stuff at the garage sale. It was something Mom did every spring, dragging out old things we didn't need to make a few $100s. I'd never thought much about it. It was just something we did. But now I was thinking about it. Now I was thinking about how many garage sales it would take to equal $24,000. How many times she'd stood in the driveway selling our old junk while she had a Rolex hidden in the basement. I commented on the post, not everyone wants to. And then I deleted it, because even as I was typing it, I could hear Chloe's voice, * do it smart. Do it from a place of actual knowledge, *. But knowledge was starting to feel like a weapon I wasn't sure how to use. The rest of the night was weird. Mom ordered Chinese food, and we ate together at the kitchen table like we were a normal family, and she asked me about school and my day, and I gave her the kinds of answers that required minimal information. She talked about work, about someone at her office who'd been annoying, about a TV show she was watching. And the whole time I was calculating. Watching her hands. Listening to her voice. Trying to figure out if there were any signs I'd missed. Any moments where she'd slipped up and revealed that she was someone who bought luxury watches while her kid borrowed clothes from friends. After dinner, I went upstairs and did something I probably shouldn't have. I opened my laptop and I googled my mother's name. Nothing bad came up, no criminal records, no lawsuits, no scandals. Just her LinkedIn profile, which made her look professional and competent. There were a few old articles from local news about community events, nothing significant. No evidence of anything except that she was an ordinary person living an ordinary life. Except she wasn't ordinary. Ordinary people didn't hide $24,000 in watches in their basement while their children walked around in 3-year-old coats. I closed the laptop and lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling again. My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe, you okay? Not really. You're going to talk to your dad, right? Yeah. * good. Keep me posted but not in writing. We can talk about it Monday, *. She wasn't wrong. The less written evidence of my plan, the better. Though that thought made me feel like I was already past the point of no return, like I was already someone who planned things carefully enough to worry about evidence. I fell asleep thinking about Saturday morning. About sitting across from my dad and trying to figure out how to ask, *, is it possible Mom is lying about money? Is it possible she's been spending child support on watches, *, and more importantly, what do I do if the answer is yes? Because Chloe had made me promise to actually think about it first. To actually know what I was accusing her of before I exploded her world with a photo dump and a caption. But somewhere between Chloe's logic and my own rage, I was developing a whole new kind of certainty. I just wasn't sure which side of myself I should trust. #chunk7. Saturday morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. I'd barely slept, running through different scenarios in my head until they all blurred together into a kind of white noise anxiety. What if Dad already knew? What if he didn't? What if he thought I was overreacting? What if he got angry at Mom and made everything worse? What if he took her side? I showered and got dressed like I was preparing for battle, which was ridiculous, but that's how it felt. Jeans that actually fit. A hoodie that didn't have a stain on it. I even tried to make my hair look less like I'd been stress pulling at it for the past 48 hours. Mom was already gone when I came downstairs. She had a shift at the hospital starting at 7. There was a note on the counter, * breakfast stuff in the fridge. Love you, * the handwriting was the same as always, neat and careful. Nothing in it betrayed anything. Nothing ever did. Dad's apartment was a 15-minute drive away, and I spent the entire ride mentally rehearsing how to start this conversation. There was no good way to begin with. Hey Dad, I found out Mom is rich and has been lying to me for years. It just made me sound paranoid. Like one of those kids whose parents actually were gaslighting them, except in this case, I actually had proof. Somewhere between anger and desperation, I'd managed to convince myself that photographing those watches in secret was justified. That showing them to my dad wasn't a betrayal, it was the only way to get the truth. Dad answered the door before I even knocked, which meant he'd been watching for me. He'd obviously made an effort too. His apartment was cleaner than usual, and he was wearing actual clothes instead of his standard weekend uniform of gym shorts and a t-shirt with a hole in it. Hey, bud, he said, pulling me into a hug. Come in. I made coffee. Do you want something to eat? I can make pancakes. Coffee's fine, I said, moving past him into the living room. The apartment always smelled the same, like his cologne and the weird lavender air freshener he kept plugging in and unplugging depending on his mood. We sat on the couch with the kind of careful distance that happens when people aren't sure where the conversation is going. Dad held his mug in both hands, waiting, and I could see the slight tension in his jaw. He knew this wasn't just a casual visit. So, he said finally. What's going on? I prepared for this. I'd made bullet points in my head. But looking at him now, I felt like the bottom was dropping out of my stomach. Because if I told him about the watches, it wasn't just telling him a fact. It was asking him to participate in something. To validate my anger. To maybe go to war with my mother over this. Has Mom ever mentioned anything about money? I started carefully. Like, to you. In a way that seemed weird. Dad set down his coffee. That's an interesting question. Where's it coming from? Just, answer it first, okay? He studied my face in that way he had, like he was trying to read something written on my skin. Your mom has always been tight with money, yes. She told me when you were born that she wanted to be careful with her finances, manage things well. I thought it was admirable, actually. Most single parents I know struggle a lot more. My throat felt tight. What if she's not struggling? What if she's been lying about struggling? Jordan. My name came out careful. What exactly are you trying to tell me? I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. I debated bringing the photos for days, and in the end, I decided that words wouldn't be enough. Nobody ever really believes words. They believe evidence. I opened my photo gallery and handed him the phone. Dad's face went through about 5 different expressions in a span of 10 seconds. Confusion, then something that might have been recognition, then shock, then something darker that I couldn't quite name. Where did you take these? He asked quietly. Basement. They're in a locked box, hidden behind the old camping equipment. He scrolled through the photos slowly, studying each one like it might change if he looked at it long enough. There were at least 30 of them, close-ups of the watches, the boxes they came in, serial numbers visible in some of them. I'd been thorough. I'd documented everything. How long have they been there? He asked. I don't know. At least a couple years. Maybe more. Dad handed the phone back to me, and when I looked at his face, I expected to see anger that matched my own. Instead, I saw something sadder. Something like disappointment, but not with me. Has your mom been denying you things? He asked. Saying she can't afford them? Yes. I felt something crack inside my chest. Yes, constantly. Last month, I needed new shoes and she said she didn't have the money. She literally made me go to the thrift store and pick through boxes. Meanwhile, she has a watch collection that costs more than a car. Dad stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. He didn't say anything for a long time. Dad? I don't know if this surprises me as much as it should, he said finally. But that doesn't make it okay. My heart started beating faster. So you believe me? You think the watches are real? I think you wouldn't bring me pictures of watches unless they were real, he said. He turned back to face me. And I think your mom might be more financially stable than she's indicated to either of us. So what do we do? I asked, and I realized I was holding my breath. He came back and sat down, this time closer to me than before. That's complicated, Jordan. Because she's still your mother. And because I don't actually know why she's doing this or what the full situation is. Does it matter why? The anger was back, sudden and hot. She lied. She's been lying this whole time. You're right, he said quietly. She did. But before we do anything else, I need to talk to her directly. I need to hear her side of this. Her side. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. There's no side. There's just fact. She has money and won't spend it on us. I'm not disagreeing with you, Dad said, and his voice was so calm it made me want to scream. But I'm not going to make decisions about this without actually talking to your mother first. And neither should you. You mean I shouldn't have shown you the pictures? No, he said. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you trusted me with this. But Jordan, if you do anything with these photos, if you post them online or send them to people, you're crossing a line that you can't uncross. You need to understand that. I felt like he'd just handed me back my own anger and told me it wasn't mine to keep. #Chunk8, The Reckoning. I didn't post the photos. Not that day, not that week. Instead, I sat with the anger like it was something alive inside me, something that needed to be fed but kept refusing the meal I offered it. Dad called Mom that same evening, and I could hear them talking in his bedroom with the door closed, low voices, the tone of people having an argument without raising their voices, which somehow felt worse than yelling. When he came out, he looked exhausted. She wants to talk to you, he said. But not yet. She needs some time to think about what she wants to say. What did she tell you? I demanded. That's between her and me right now, Dad said, which made my blood boil. But I will tell you this, there's more to the story than what you've figured out on your own. There's always more to the story. That's what adults always say when they're about to excuse bad behavior. I went back to school the next day and tried to pretend nothing had changed, which was impossible because everything had changed. I kept my phone in my pocket like it contained some kind of weapon. I'd taken the photos off my cloud storage, moved them to a private folder, password protected. Part of me was waiting for permission to use them. Part of me was daring anyone to find out I had them. By Thursday, Mom still hadn't called. Dad texted me asking if I wanted to come over again, and I said no. I wanted to stay at home and watch her, to see if I could detect the lie in her movements, the fraud in the way she heated up leftovers or signed permission slips or told me she loved me. Everything looked exactly the same as it always had. Everything felt different. When she finally showed up at my school on Friday, actually came to pick me up, which she never did, I felt my stomach drop. She was dressed for work, still in her hospital scrubs, and her face looked like something that had been left out in the sun too long, bleached of color. Get in the car, she said. I got in. She drove for a long time without speaking, and I watched the city pass by, watched her grip the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. She pulled into a park I'd gone to as a kid, a place with a playground that I hadn't visited in years. The equipment was still the same colors, just more faded. She parked and turned off the engine. "Your father told me you found the watches," she said. I didn't respond. Didn't see the point. "I need you to understand something," she continued, and her voice was shaking. Not as an excuse, but as an explanation. "When you were born, I was terrified. I was so terrified that I would end up like my mother, broke and desperate and having to beg my ex-husband for money. Having to stay in a situation I hated because I had no other options." She gripped the steering wheel tighter. "So I started buying things that held their value. Watches. I told myself it was an investment. That it was my insurance policy." "Insurance against what?" I asked coldly. "Against being trapped." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were red. "Against needing your father, or any man, ever again. Against being poor and powerless the way I grew up." "So you lied to me instead," I said. "You made me poor. You made it like we didn't have money when you did." "Yes." She didn't try to defend it. "I did. And I was wrong." I waited for her to continue, to add qualifications or justifications, but she didn't. She just sat there, looking at me like she was waiting for a verdict. "I took photos," I said. "Of all of them." Her face went white. "Jordan." "I was going to post them," I said. "On social media. I was going to tell everyone. I was going to make sure everyone knew what you've been doing." Mom closed her eyes. I watched her take a breath, then another one. When she opened them again, she looked at me with something that might have been acceptance of whatever I was about to do. "But I didn't," I finished. "Yet." "Yet," she repeated quietly. "Why should I?" I asked. "Why shouldn't I? You've been lying to my face for years. You've been making me feel like our family was barely surviving when you had all these things. Expensive things. I needed new shoes, Mom. I needed them. And you made me feel like I was a burden for asking." She started to cry then, not dramatically, just tears that slipped down her face while she kept her hands on the steering wheel and stared straight ahead. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry, Jordan. I made you a part of my fear. I passed my anxiety down to you like it was something I owed you. And I made you suffer unnecessarily because of my own issues. There's no excuse for that." We sat in silence in that parked car while I tried to figure out who I was supposed to be in this moment. The victim who had a right to destroy her. The child who was supposed to forgive her because she said sorry. The person who had all the power and wasn't sure what to do with it. "I want to sell the collection," Mom said finally. "I want to set up an actual college fund for you. Not just college, whatever you want. If you want to take a year off and travel, if you want to go to trade school, if you want to get a degree. I want to pay for my therapy, too, because clearly I have some things to work through. And I want to be honest with you. Not because I'm afraid you'll expose me, but because you deserve that." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized something. Having the power to destroy someone doesn't make you want to. It just makes you tired. "I want to know why," I said. "Everything. All of it." "I know," she said. "And I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything." Over the next few weeks, she did. We talked about her childhood, her fears, her choices. We talked about the watches, some of which she sold, some of which she kept, all of which she stopped hiding. Dad got involved in conversations about money and honesty and what it meant to be a family that actually communicated. It wasn't perfect. We weren't suddenly this happy unit. But we became something closer to true, which turned out to be its own kind of justice. I deleted the photos when I was ready. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to.